Cash Money Shields. Sugar, buckle in, because the timeline is about to catch a body this week, and I promise you it isn't going to be pretty. After weeks of walking around Atlanta like she owned every zip code from Buckhead to Bankhead, Claressa Shields finally picked the wrong city, the wrong woman, and the wrong microphone, and now Claressa Shields is watching her entire brand catch fire in front of the culture. And listen, this whole thing is stacked to blow, because when Eva Marcille steps out of retirement mode and speaks a whole paragraph on the internet, you already know somebody done wrote a check they cannot cash. Claressa Shields wrote that check. Claressa Shields signed it, dated it, notarized it, and mailed it certified, and now the collectors are lined up around the block waiting for Claressa Shields to open the door. You already know I'm parked front row for the fireworks. Let me back this all the way up for the people who just walked in the room, because Claressa Shields did not stumble into this catastrophe. Claressa Shields marched right into it, chin up, gloves off. Claressa Shields sat down with Ms. Shyneka in Atlanta for what should have been a routine promotional interview. Nothing fancy, nothing controversial, just a fight camp sit-down to move some pay-per-view numbers. And Ms. Shyneka, being the professional radio personality she is, asked Claressa Shields one question. One question. That one question opened a door Claressa Shields absolutely, positively should have kept locked, and behind that door was every demon, every sucker, every internet gremlin, and every woman in Atlanta who has been waiting for a reason to remind Claressa Shields that Atlanta has a memory longer than a mortgage. The question was simple. Ms. Shyneka asked Claressa Shields how long she planned to stay tangled up with the man affectionately referred to across the culture as Cheeseburger Pap. That was the whole question. And instead of laughing it off, instead of pivoting back to the fight, instead of handling it with the media polish a two-time Olympic gold medalist should have banked by now, Claressa Shields decided the appropriate response was to torch her own promotional run in real time. Anyway, moving on to how ugly it got. Because listen, this is the same Papoose we are talking about. This is the same man who allegedly waited a full 7, 8 years on Remy Ma while Remy Ma was locked up. This is the same man who reportedly turned around after all that loyalty and said, and I quote the culture's summary here, he was not giving up half of anything. Claressa Shields, sugar, this is the resume of the man you have chosen as the hill you want to boxing glove first die on. Claressa Shields, this is who you want to burn your endorsements over. This is who you want to torch your sponsorships over. Because when the boxing gloves come off, and they will come off, because you cannot swing at a heavy bag until you are 90 years old, Claressa Shields, what exactly is the retirement plan? You think Nike is calling? You think Puma is answering the phone? You think anybody is signing a woman up to hawk their product when she spent her prime interview cycle screaming at a radio host in her own city? Rumor rippling through the culture is the brand meetings have already gone quiet. But that was only the appetizer. Because Claressa Shields did not stop there. Claressa Shields chose violence, and then Claressa Shields chose it again, and then a third time, because Claressa Shields, apparently, did not do the pre-flight research any celebrity is supposed to do before flying into Atlanta and talking sideways to a woman who sits at the intersection of Atlanta radio, Atlanta reality television history, and America's next top model royalty. Because guess who happens to be Ms. Shyneka's best friend? Guess who picked up the phone and decided she had heard enough? Cash Money Shields, meet Eva Marcille. And the crazy work part, the part that had every group chat in a chokehold, is that Eva Marcille did not scream. Eva Marcille did not curse. Eva Marcille took to the internet with the temperature of a woman who has been through a boardroom, a courtroom, a delivery room, and a runway, and Eva Marcille cooked Claressa Shields with pure grown woman surgical precision. Eva Marcille wrote, and I am paraphrasing gently for the read-along audience, hold on one goddamn minute. Are we talking about the same interview? Because the aftermath energy Claressa Shields is bringing does not match the on-air record, and on-air Claressa Shields had all the space and opportunity in the world to check whatever needed checking. Let's keep it cute, Eva Marcille said. Two beautiful black women, one microphone, plenty of respect available for both. But nobody, not Eva Marcille, not Atlanta, not the Hawks, not the Braves, not the Falcons, not the Dream, not the entire greater metropolitan area from Marietta to McDonough, plays about Ms. Shyneka. Nobody. So Claressa Shields, Eva Marcille said, watch your throat on the way in. Sugar, that line right there. That was a headshot. Eva Marcille aimed directly at the arteries and Claressa Shields did not even see it coming. Because remember, Claressa Shields is a boxer. Claressa Shields is trained to see punches. Claressa Shields is a two-time Olympic gold medalist. Claressa Shields is the undisputed heavyweight champion. And Claressa Shields still walked directly into the cleanest counter of her professional career, and the counter came from a supermodel with a comment section, not a challenger with a promoter. And I'll leave it right there. Now let's rewind, because we still have not even gotten to the part where Claressa Shields decided the correct pivot was to physically threaten a woman who does not box for a living. Claressa Shields hopped on her own live stream and offered Ms. Shyneka the following, and again, I am cleaning this up because we are trying to keep the algorithm friendly. Claressa Shields said Ms. Shyneka needed to go take up boxing so she could learn how to fight, because from the visual assessment alone, Claressa Shields had determined that Ms. Shyneka had, and I quote, 3 swings in her before she got tired and started asking for an inhaler. 3 swings. Claressa Shields. Are we serious? Cash Money Shields, you are a world champion. Ain't nobody about to box you. Ain't nobody signing up for that fight. Ain't nobody dumb enough to enter your professional field of expertise on your terms. That is not how any of this works. That is not how any of this has ever worked. That is not how any of this will ever work. If Claressa Shields wants to impress the culture, Claressa Shields should challenge Ms. Shyneka to a game of Scrabble. Put down a 10-letter word on a triple word score. Now that is a flex. That is a matchup the internet would actually tune in for. Because right now what Claressa Shields is doing is the equivalent of a Formula 1 driver challenging your grandmother to a race and then bragging when grandma does not accept. It is not the flex Claressa Shields thinks it is. It never was. It never will be. And every single fight fan who has been in Claressa Shields' corner is watching Claressa Shields squander the goodwill they spent the last decade building for her. Anyway, moving on to how Claressa Shields somehow made this even worse. Because instead of taking the L, instead of logging off, instead of letting her publicist do a rescue mission, Claressa Shields opened her second live and went at the fans. Yes. The fans. Claressa Shields turned around and told the audience paying for the pay-per-view that if she came into Atlanta to promote her fight, why were they asking her questions that had nothing to do with the fight? Sugar. Ms. Shyneka asked Claressa Shields about Papoose. Papoose is the promotional face standing next to Claressa Shields at every weigh-in. Claressa Shields herself has said Papoose is upstairs at the fight. Papoose is at ringside. Papoose is the corner. Papoose is the hype man. Papoose is the walkout music. Papoose has been marketed as part of the Claressa Shields boxing product for the better part of 2 years. So Claressa Shields, how does a question about Papoose have nothing to do with the fight? Papoose is the fight promotion. Ms. Shyneka's question was directly on brand. According to folks close to the situation, even the promotional team was quietly wincing. And then, sugar, Claressa Shields hit the button that ended her entire promotional cycle in one keyword. Claressa Shields banned Ms. Shyneka from the fight. Claressa Shields also, apparently, banned Ms. Shyneka's sister from the actual funeral event, which we are still trying to unpack, because at this point Claressa Shields learned a new word and Claressa Shields is treating that word like a Christmas present. Ban. Ban. Everybody is banned. Everybody is uninvited. Everybody is barred. It is like watching a toddler discover the word no. Claressa Shields is banning people the way a landlord evicts tenants. And the wildest part is Claressa Shields is banning people who were not attending the fight in the first place. You cannot ban someone from a party they were not planning to attend. That is not a ban. That is a scheduling coincidence. And I'll leave it right there. But here is where the story turns cinematic, sugar, because now we have to talk about the elephant in the room. We have to talk about Cheeseburger Pap. And I want everyone to understand something before we go further. Rumor rippling through the culture is Ms. Shyneka's original question was not random. Ms. Shyneka's original question came from a very specific well of Atlanta receipts about Papoose that have been sitting in group chats for months. According to folks close to the situation, there are stories from a couple of the truck stops off I-20 that have been circulating for a minute now. According to folks close to the situation, there are receipts about how Papoose earned the nickname the culture has bestowed on him. According to folks close to the situation, Ms. Shyneka was actually being gentle with her wording, because the raw version of that question was 5 times more brutal than what actually made it to air. And Claressa Shields, instead of thanking Ms. Shyneka for the softball version, decided to escalate. Cash Money Shields, you are punching down at the person who was actually cushioning the blow for you. Sugar, this is the geopolitics of talk radio, and Claressa Shields did not read the intelligence briefing. Ms. Shyneka handed Claressa Shields an on-ramp. Claressa Shields blew right past it, straight into the ditch, and then Claressa Shields blamed the ditch. Let us talk about the papoose of it all, because that is the load-bearing wall of this entire scandal. Papoose has been quietly reinventing himself as Claressa Shields' emotional support cornerman for the last 2 years. Papoose walks her out. Papoose handles the press. Papoose narrates the vlogs. Papoose is the media strategy. And listen, the culture noticed. The culture has been noticing. Remy Ma noticed. Remy Ma said publicly, on record, that she would fight Claressa Shields for $1 over how Claressa Shields entered the picture. $1. That is not a bluff. That is a receipt with a price tag on it. And Claressa Shields, instead of navigating that landmine with grace, has spent the last 24 months insisting that Papoose is the most loyal man in hip-hop, that all men do not cheat, that her man does not cheat, that Papoose is a saint in a durag. Sugar. Sugar. Nobody in the culture is buying that press release. Not one person. Not Atlanta, not New York, not the boxing writers, not the hip-hop podcasters, and definitely not Ms. Shyneka. According to folks close to the situation, the Papoose situation is worse than anyone in the Claressa Shields camp has publicly admitted. According to folks close to the situation, there are names attached. There are dates attached. There are locations attached. There is a specific window during Claressa Shields' training camp when Papoose was, allegedly, not exactly where the vlog suggested he was. And this is not new information to the culture. This is the exact intelligence Ms. Shyneka was operating on when she asked her original question. So when Claressa Shields turned around and lit Ms. Shyneka up on live, Claressa Shields was not just fighting a radio host. Claressa Shields was fighting the entire underground receipt economy of Atlanta, and Atlanta does not lose that fight. Atlanta has never lost that fight. Atlanta will never lose that fight. Anyway, moving on to the receipts that Eva Marcille has been sitting on. Because Eva Marcille did not step into this feud unarmed. Eva Marcille has been in the entertainment industry since Claressa Shields was in middle school. Eva Marcille has run reality television. Eva Marcille has run political campaigns. Eva Marcille has run a household through the most public custody war of the 2010s. Eva Marcille understands narrative warfare in a way Claressa Shields simply does not, and cannot, and will not learn in time to save this promotional cycle. When Eva Marcille said watch your throat on the way in, that was not a threat. That was a preview. That was a coming attractions trailer for the receipts Eva Marcille could drop if Eva Marcille chose to open the vault. And Eva Marcille has not opened the vault yet. Cash Money Shields, you are still in the honeymoon phase of this beef. This is Eva Marcille being polite. This is Eva Marcille on cruise control. This is Eva Marcille warming up in the bullpen. Eva Marcille has not thrown a single fastball yet. Because Eva Marcille understands something Claressa Shields has yet to learn, which is that the loudest voice in the room is almost never the most dangerous. The most dangerous voice in the room is the one that speaks once, calmly, and lets the audience finish the sentence in their own head. That is exactly what Eva Marcille did. And the audience finished the sentence. And now Cash Money Shields is trending for reasons she absolutely does not want to be trending for. Sugar, listen, this is the part where I have to be honest with the audience. Because we cannot pretend this is only about a question at a radio interview. This is about Claressa Shields' entire brand architecture. Because the truth is Claressa Shields has always been talented in the ring and reckless with the microphone. Claressa Shields is the most decorated women's boxer of her generation. Two-time Olympic gold medalist. Undisputed at multiple weights. A resume that should have sponsors kicking down her door. And yet, Claressa Shields keeps missing the crossover moment. Ronda Rousey crossed over. Serena crossed over. Simone crossed over. Katie Taylor crossed over. Claressa Shields, arguably the most accomplished resume of all of them, keeps stopping herself at the door because Claressa Shields keeps confusing being right with being ready. And this Ms. Shyneka incident is the loudest example the culture has ever seen. Because listen, this whole thing is stacked to blow. There is a specific reason boxing promoters have been quietly distancing themselves from the Claressa Shields promotional apparatus over the last 6 months. According to folks close to the situation, at least 2 major brands were in advanced conversation with Cash Money Shields' team about long-term partnerships. Multi-year deals. Cross-market deals. The kind of deals that pay you when you cannot throw a jab anymore. Rumor rippling through the culture is those conversations have been placed on ice, cold storage, indefinite pause, because nobody wants a spokesperson who spends her promotional interviews threatening Atlanta radio personalities with fictional inhaler references. That is not brand-safe language. That is not Puma language. That is not Nike language. That is barely YouTube language. And that is before we talk about the ripple effect on the actual pay-per-view. Because here is the ugly math nobody in the Claressa Shields camp wants to face. When you promote a fight, 90% of your buys come from soft fans. Soft fans are casual viewers who tune in because they like the storyline. Soft fans do not watch boxing every weekend. Soft fans read the headlines. Soft fans watch the promotional interviews. Soft fans decide in the 72 hours before the fight whether they are spending $70 on a Saturday night. And what is the headline soft fans are seeing right now? They are seeing Claressa Shields banning a beloved Atlanta radio host. They are seeing Eva Marcille cook Claressa Shields on the internet with one paragraph. They are seeing Cash Money Shields threaten to send an inhaler to a woman who did not accept the fight. That is not a headline that sells pay-per-views. That is a headline that sells podcast subscriptions to podcasts making fun of Claressa Shields. According to folks close to the situation, the fight is now projected to underperform its original buy rate forecast by a meaningful margin. Meaningful. The word my source used was meaningful. And this is a fight Claressa Shields specifically fought for, negotiated hard for, and positioned as her crossover moment. Claressa Shields cooked her own crossover moment on a live stream over a question about her boyfriend's nickname. Anyway, moving on to what happens next. Because this is where the story stops being a beef and starts being a cautionary tale. Because Ms. Shyneka, Sugar, is not going anywhere. Ms. Shyneka works in Atlanta radio, which means Ms. Shyneka is going to be on the air Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and every day forward, and every one of those days Ms. Shyneka has a microphone and a memory. Eva Marcille is not going anywhere. Eva Marcille has a podcast, a platform, and a Rolodex that stretches from Los Angeles to Lagos. The Atlanta hip-hop press is not going anywhere. And Claressa Shields, who does not live in Atlanta, who was flying in for a promotional visit, who now cannot show her face in half the neighborhoods that would have otherwise turned out to support her, has essentially quarantined herself from the exact market she was trying to convert. And here is the part that keeps me up at night as a media observer, Sugar. Because Claressa Shields' team should have caught this. Claressa Shields' publicist should have caught this. Claressa Shields' manager should have caught this. Claressa Shields' promoter should have caught this. Somebody should have pulled Claressa Shields aside within 30 minutes of that first live stream and said, "Champ, we are ending this today. We are logging off. We are calling Ms. Shyneka's producer. We are sending flowers. We are cutting a 2-line apology. We are salvaging the pay-per-view." Instead, according to folks close to the situation, Claressa Shields' inner circle stayed silent. Nobody grabbed the wheel. Nobody hit the emergency brake. Everybody watched Cash Money Shields drive the promotional bus off the cliff and then applauded the landing. Rumor rippling through the culture is Papoose himself allegedly tried to intervene privately and was allegedly told, in the most Claressa Shields way possible, to stay in his lane. Because Cash Money Shields, apparently, does not need advice from a man whose primary contribution to the household is showing up upstairs on fight night. And I am not making that up. That is directly from the source material Claressa Shields herself put on the internet. Claressa Shields said Papoose is upstairs at the fight. Sugar, if he is upstairs, he is not at the fight. Upstairs is not ringside. Upstairs is the concession stand. Upstairs is where the sponsors sit. Upstairs is the corporate box. And what exactly is Papoose doing in the corporate box? Papoose is not a corporate sponsor. Papoose is not an executive. Papoose is Cheeseburger Pap. And the culture is starting to ask questions about who exactly is footing the bill for Papoose to be upstairs, and those questions do not have flattering answers. Now, listen, this whole thing is stacked to blow because we still have not talked about the Remy Ma angle. Remy Ma has been sitting in silence during this entire Ms. Shyneka episode, and silence from Remy Ma is not neutrality. Silence from Remy Ma is a strategic decision. According to folks close to the situation, Remy Ma has been advised to let Claressa Shields cook herself, because the more Claressa Shields talks, the less Remy Ma has to say. Remy Ma is watching the Claressa Shields self-destruct with her feet up. Remy Ma does not need to fight Claressa Shields for $1 anymore, because Claressa Shields is fighting herself for free, and Remy Ma is watching the show with popcorn. And that is the cruelest twist of this entire arc, sugar. Because Claressa Shields entered this promotional cycle believing she was the alpha in every room. Two-time Olympic gold medalist. Undisputed champion. The face of women's boxing. And in the span of 1 week, Claressa Shields has been outmaneuvered by an Atlanta radio host, dressed down by a former reality television host, silently outclassed by Remy Ma, and gently distanced from by her own promotional partners. All of it. In 1 week. Over one question. About one boyfriend. Whose nickname is Cheeseburger Pap. Anyway, moving on to what the culture wants to know. Because here is where we open the floor. Should Cash Money Shields keep the crown quiet, apologize to Ms. Shyneka, kiss Eva Marcille's ring, salvage the pay-per-view, and let her hands do the talking on fight night? Should Claressa Shields log off, delete every live stream, hire a real publicist, and pretend the last 7 days did not happen? Or should Cash Money Shields do what Cash Money Shields does and burn the whole Coliseum down, escalate to Remy Ma directly, drag Ms. Shyneka's sister, drag Eva Marcille's ex-husband, drag Atlanta itself, and go full scorched earth on the entire city? Because both roads end in a fight. The question is only which fight, and against whom, and for what stakes. Personally, sugar, I do not think Cash Money Shields is capable of taking the quiet exit. Cash Money Shields has never taken a quiet exit in her life. Cash Money Shields is going to wake up on a random Wednesday, decide she has something else to say, and log back on, and the entire internet will be waiting. Because the timeline has a memory longer than a mortgage, and the timeline does not miss. The timeline is watching Claressa Shields. Eva Marcille is watching Claressa Shields. Ms. Shyneka is watching Claressa Shields. Remy Ma is watching Claressa Shields. Atlanta is watching Claressa Shields. And the promoters, the sponsors, the pay-per-view executives, and the boxing writers who used to be in Cash Money Shields' corner are all watching Claressa Shields with the same expression, which is the expression of an insurance adjuster staring at a totaled car. There is one final thread I want to pull on, sugar, before we close this out. Because the question everybody keeps asking privately, and nobody is asking publicly yet, is what happens to Cash Money Shields' legacy if this entire arc becomes the defining chapter of her 20s. Because Claressa Shields is still a young woman. Claressa Shields has years of prime boxing left. Claressa Shields could, tomorrow, hire the right team, apologize the right way, and repair the damage. But according to folks close to the situation, the boxing history books are already writing the wrong sentence about her, and once the history books write a sentence, that sentence tends to stick. Ask Mike Tyson. Ask Floyd Mayweather. Ask any world champion who ever had a mid-career image collapse. That sentence follows you into the Hall of Fame lobby. That sentence follows you into the commentary booth. That sentence follows you into the coaching career you were counting on for retirement. That sentence follows you forever. And Cash Money Shields, right now, is writing that sentence for herself, in front of the entire culture, in real time, on a live stream, over a question about a boyfriend whose brand consists mostly of allegedly ordering off the value menu at establishments the internet has thoroughly documented. Rumor rippling through the culture is even Papoose's own inner circle has started asking Papoose to please talk his lady down before this becomes his fault too. Because in the current media climate, a man does not escape a scandal that begins with his own girlfriend banning people from a boxing match over a question about him. That scandal, sugar, attaches to Papoose whether he wants it or not. And Papoose, historically, has never had the shoulders for that kind of weight. Anyway, moving on, because I want to zoom out on the bigger picture, sugar. Because what you are actually watching, when you watch this Claressa Shields vs Ms. Shyneka situation, is a live-fire demonstration of what happens when the internet outgrows a celebrity faster than the celebrity outgrows the internet. Claressa Shields is playing 2018 rules in a 2026 media environment. In 2018, you could scream on a live stream and the audience would forget by Friday. In 2026, sugar, the audience does not forget by Friday. The audience does not even forget by 2029. The audience compiles. The audience clips. The audience archives. The audience uploads. The audience mirrors. The audience captions. The audience translates it into 6 other languages and reposts it on TikTok, on Reels, on Shorts, on X, on Threads, on every platform Claressa Shields has ever signed up for and every platform Claressa Shields has never even heard of. And every one of those platforms is a permanent tattoo on Cash Money Shields' brand. According to folks close to the situation, Claressa Shields does not fully understand the size of the crater she just walked into. According to folks close to the situation, the private conversations happening inside her camp right now are focused entirely on damage control, and damage control, in this stage of the news cycle, is not a strategy. Damage control is triage. Triage means saving what you can. Triage means writing off the rest. And there is a lot to write off, sugar. There is a whole lot to write off. The endorsement track is on the operating table. The pay-per-view track is on the operating table. The mainstream crossover track is on the operating table. The commentary career track is on the operating table. And the surgeon, who happens to be a 2-time Olympic gold medalist, keeps grabbing the scalpel out of her own doctor's hand. Let me pull on one more strand, sugar, because this is the part the boxing press is scared to say out loud. Claressa Shields has always had a chip on her shoulder about respect. And listen, historically, that chip made her great. That chip is what carried Claressa Shields out of Flint. That chip is what carried Claressa Shields onto the Olympic podium at 17 years old. That chip is what carried Claressa Shields through undisputed champion status in multiple weight classes when the entire men's side of boxing was pretending she did not exist. That chip is a superpower. That chip built the whole resume. But that chip, sugar, is also a liability, because a chip on the shoulder without media training is a walking press conference disaster. And Claressa Shields, in her 30s now, still swings that chip like she is 19. Which is exactly why we ended up here, on a Tuesday, watching Eva Marcille cook her on the timeline. Anyway, moving on to what Ms. Shyneka has said publicly since the smoke started. Because Ms. Shyneka, credit where credit is due, has handled this with a level of poise that is currently making Claressa Shields look even smaller. Ms. Shyneka has not screamed. Ms. Shyneka has not cursed. Ms. Shyneka has not gone live to clap back. Ms. Shyneka has, in fact, done the opposite of everything Claressa Shields has done, which is why Ms. Shyneka is currently winning the public relations war by a 2-touchdown margin. Every time Claressa Shields opens her mouth, Ms. Shyneka wins another round. Every time Claressa Shields threatens somebody, Ms. Shyneka wins another round. Every time Claressa Shields bans somebody, Ms. Shyneka wins another round. Ms. Shyneka is winning by simply existing. Which, sugar, is the most efficient form of victory the culture has ever recognized. Rumor rippling through the culture is that MS. Shyneka has been approached by at least 3 podcast networks in the last 48 hours with offers to expand her platform. 3 networks. Which means the Claressa Shields vs. Ms. Shyneka arc, whether Claressa Shields intended it or not, has accidentally functioned as the largest promotional campaign of Ms. Shyneka's career. Claressa Shields, in trying to bury Ms. Shyneka, has essentially bankrolled Ms. Shyneka's expansion. That is the geopolitics of the internet, sugar. Every time you punch down, you promote the person you were trying to punch down on. Claressa Shields did not learn that lesson in the amateur brackets. Claressa Shields did not learn that lesson in the pros. Claressa Shields is learning that lesson right now, on the internet, on live, in public, in front of every person she was hoping to impress. Let me talk about Papoose one more time, sugar, because Papoose is the ghost in this entire machine. Papoose, in theory, should be Claressa Shields' greatest asset in the culture. Papoose is a rap veteran. Papoose has industry relationships. Papoose has been through public scandals before. Papoose knows how the media cycle works. Papoose should be the person telling Claressa Shields, baby, put the phone down, we are not doing this today. Instead, Papoose is nowhere to be found. Papoose is silent. Papoose is invisible. Papoose is upstairs, as Claressa Shields would say, which apparently means Papoose is at the concession stand while the ring is on fire. According to folks close to the situation, Papoose has been strategically instructed to stay off social media entirely during this news cycle. Which is understandable. Because if Papoose opens his mouth, the culture is going to open the truck stop file. The culture is going to open the receipts. The culture is going to open the group chat archives that have been screenshotting Papoose's whereabouts for approximately 18 months. And Papoose, sugar, does not want that file opened. Nobody in the Papoose orbit wants that file opened. And Claressa Shields, ironically, is the one pouring gasoline on the padlock every time she opens a new live stream. Anyway, moving on to what this all means for women's boxing as an industry, because we cannot ignore that piece either. Because Claressa Shields does not just carry her own brand. Claressa Shields carries the flag for the entire sport. When Claressa Shields wins, women's boxing wins. When Claressa Shields signs a deal, women's boxing benefits. When Claressa Shields loses her endorsements, women's boxing loses opportunity. When Claressa Shields' pay-per-view underperforms, the next woman on the card gets a smaller offer sheet. That is the ecosystem. That is the trickle-down economics of prize fighting. And right now, sugar, Claressa Shields is trickling losses onto every woman coming up behind her, and those women, according to folks close to the situation, are starting to talk about it privately. Which brings me to my favorite subplot, sugar. Because the young generation of women boxers, the 22-year-olds coming up right now, are watching Claressa Shields and thinking two things simultaneously. Thing 1, Claressa Shields cleared the path for us and we owe her our careers. Thing 2, Claressa Shields is currently torching the path she cleared and we need to build a detour before the whole road burns. And you can see it in the interviews. You can see it in the podcast quotes. You can see it in the careful, diplomatic language the next generation is using. They love Claressa Shields. They respect Claressa Shields. They also, quietly, do not want to be Claressa Shields. And that, sugar, is the loudest verdict a legacy can receive. Rumor rippling through the culture is that at least one high-profile promoter has already started making phone calls to the next generation, asking whether they would be willing to headline a pay-per-view within the next 12 months. Which means, in industry language, Claressa Shields is being succession planned. In real time. On the same news cycle that Ms. Shyneka is being courted by 3 podcast networks. That is not a coincidence, sugar. That is what happens when the culture decides it is ready for the next chapter. And the culture, right now, is turning the page on Claressa Shields whether Claressa Shields is ready or not. So we sit here at the end of this story with more open questions than we started with. Will Cash Money Shields apologize? Almost certainly not. Will Ms. Shyneka be back on the air Monday morning laughing about it? Almost certainly yes. Will Eva Marcille drop another paragraph? That depends entirely on how much longer Claressa Shields keeps talking. Will the pay-per-view underperform? The forecast says yes. Will Remy Ma finally weigh in publicly? The clock is ticking. Will Papoose himself release a statement? Not a chance in the world. And will the Atlanta hip-hop press ever forget how Cash Money Shields talked to their favorite radio personality in her own city? Sugar. 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 Not in this lifetime. Not in the next lifetime. Not in the lifetime after that. Atlanta has a memory longer than a mortgage, and Atlanta collects. And there is one more question I want to leave you with, sugar, because it is the question I cannot stop thinking about. What happens if Ms. Shyneka one day decides to sit down for a long-form interview and tell her entire side of the story? Not a tweet. Not a live stream clapback. A full sit-down. Cameras rolling. Producers in the booth. 2 hours of receipts. Because Ms. Shyneka, according to folks close to the situation, has been sitting on her side of this story since the moment the cameras stopped rolling on the original interview. And if Ms. Shyneka ever opens that vault, sugar, the internet is going to shut down for a week. Because Ms. Shyneka has the receipts Claressa Shields does not know Ms. Shyneka has. MS. Shyneka has the timestamps. Ms. Shyneka has the DMs, Ms. Shyneka has the group chat. And Ms. Shyneka, right now, is doing the smartest possible thing, which is nothing. Ms. Shyneka is letting Claressa Shields talk. Ms. Shyneka is letting Claressa Shields dig. Ms. Shyneka is letting Claressa Shields hand her the shovel and dig the grave herself. Let me know in the comments, because I actually want to know this one. Team Cash Money Shields, is there any scenario, any at all, where you defend how she handled this? Team Ms. Shyneka, do you think this scandal ends Claressa Shields' promotional run for good? And Team Eva Marcille, do you want Eva to open the vault, or do you want Eva to keep it locked and let Cash Money Shields keep swinging at ghosts? Drop it below. Read the replies. Because the timeline is watching. And I am already scrolling. And I'll leave it right there, sugar. Until the next chapter, and there will absolutely be a next chapter, because Cash Money Shields never lets a chapter end quietly. This has been your girl, signing off. You already know I'm parked front row for the fireworks.